We have said that the four Gospels answer to the four faces of the cherubim. Matthew is the face of the lion, Mark is the face of the ox and or the calf, Luke is the face of the man, and John is the face of the flying eagle. These are the four ways in which God has deemed it necessary to manifest Jesus Christ to the world in order for us to get an adequate understanding of the incarnate God and his mission. Now, these revelations began as to the writings in the Gospel of John. And that is because each of the other three Gospels tell a story that plays out in time and history. The Gospel of John starts in eternity before time and history unfolds. Indeed, it starts before anything was ever created or made, according to verse 3. Clearly, in the Gospel of John, the apostle is telling us this and nothing less. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Why is it, do you suppose, that Jesus Christ is here referred to as, quote, the Word, unquote? Well, this is not one of the more difficult issues in the Gospel or in the Bible. The explanation lies in the fact that Jesus Christ is revealing God to us. The Greek word here translated logos means something said, including the thought and not just the sound, a topic as to its subject and the discourse, reasoning, including the mental faculty or motive, especially the lexicons tell us the divine expression, and it also has the meaning to show or to work, which is quite important. So, what is this apostle telling us? He is saying that Christ is the revelation of God, he is the demonstration of God, he is the expression of God, he is the illustration of God, he is the mind and thinking of God, he is the reasoning of God, he is the motivation of God, he is the exact image of God, and he is the embodiment of the work of God. In the perfect and holy God, the character, the words, and the works are all at one. Unlike fallen man, even religious man, there is no contradiction between what God is, what he says, and what he does. His works and God's works are the same works. From eternity to eternity, God has always had a way of expressing himself, defining himself, revealing himself, and showing himself through his mighty deeds and acts. That way has always been the Word, who was always with God and has always been God. The one here described as the Word was, is, and ever shall be the God. And so we see that the first saying we are told in the Gospels with regard to Jesus Christ is that he is the everlasting God, that he always existed, and that when we see him, as verse 18 of the first chapter of John tells us, and we'll get into that more fully later, we will be seeing the God. No man has seen God as he sits on his throne in the heavens outside of time and history, but the only begotten of the Father, this incarnate God, will reveal him to us. Now this is entirely consistent with the writings of the Jewish prophets. In Isaiah 9:6, God spoke through the prophet and said, "For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful, Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. We're further told that the Word has created everything but God himself, who is ever existent and uncreated. Positively nothing exists anywhere that was not created by the Word that we are going to see incarnated in the Gospels. This babe in Bethlehem's manger, which will come into our focus shortly in this study, created the angels, created Lucifer, the former son of the morning, created everything that is in heaven, created the universe, hung the stars in space, created every tree, every plant, every fish, every fowl, every animal, and man upon this earth. We will miss the message of the four Gospels, the meaning of the four faces of the cherubim, the person and the work of Jesus Christ, the message of the Gospel as a whole, and the hope of mankind for the future if we miss this. But as to the message, the meaning of the Gospels, the meaning of the Incarnation, the startling, astounding, wonderful truth is just beginning. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. You will perhaps remember, when we talked about God last time, that he is Jehovah, he is the life, and the giver of life. But this means far more than that Jesus Christ is one of the places you can go to get life and light. It's telling us that life in the legitimate, ultimate, meaningful, eternal sense is in God, comes from God, and does not exist apart from God. It further means that this life of God is inseparable from the light. Just as God is the life, so he is the light. There is no life apart from God, and there is no light apart from God, and there is no life apart from light. Now, this is speaking of light in the ultimate sense. The concept of the light that is in God goes far beyond the physical. Though it was in the infancy of man and at a time when it could not fully be comprehended, God underscored this all-important and all-inclusive issue when he commanded man to get his instruction for life and its meaning in this earth that God had prepared and created for man from the tree of life. I will condense what could be a very long discussion by saying that the light in God, the light of life, which comes from the tree of life, comprehends spiritual, moral, ethical, social, physical, intellectual light. And the light shineth in darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not. The four Gospels are the beginning of the New Testament division of the Bible. The four Gospels are going to reveal to us the incarnate God. This revelation, in conjunction with the further revelations that Jesus said would come after the kingdom of God was established with power at Pentecost, comprises the complete and comprehensive revelation of the little book, which is the Gospel of the New Testament. A major part, and the first part of this revealing of the incarnate God, has to do with why he came. Now, that could be broken down into many subheadings, but it's all comprehended in this. The Old Testament of the law failed because it was weak through the flesh. It was a contractual deal made first with the nation of Israel and then with the world as a whole, according to Romans chapter 3, requiring man with his own mind, character, and convictions, and with considerable help from God, to bring himself back to the tree of life and rid himself of the vices he acquired at the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. The covenant of the law made at Mount Sinai was only a fleshing out, a filling in, and then an organizing of the covenant of flesh made with man when God extended him access to the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. The crucifixion of Jesus Christ was the great abomination spoken of by the prophet, brought on the voiding of that covenant forever as figured in the cursing of the fig tree, and declaring all that had gone before as a failure insofar as reuniting man to God was concerned. Now we have this succinctly put in the first chapter of John, verse 17. For the law was given by Moses, but grace and truth came by Jesus Christ. If there was to be salvation for mankind, if the family that God had gone to all this trouble to establish was ever to be realized, God would have to come down into this world and do it himself. This was because it was evident that man would not, because he could not, do it. In the mind, in the heart, in the morals, in the values, in the ambitions of fallen man, there was no light. Their concepts of freedom were not complete submission to the perfect, holy, righteous, life-giving words of God. Man's understanding of freedom, as expressed at the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, was autonomy, freedom from God, freedom from law and rule, freedom from morality, freedom from discipline, freedom from decency, freedom from the love of truth, and freedom from the love of the Creator. Jesus Christ, the Word, the light, the life, the truth, the exemplification of who and what God is, was in the world, and the world could not see any of it. They had an entirely different view of king and kingdom, religious world as well as secular. The light shineth in darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. The same came for a witness, to bear witness to the light, that all men through him might be saved. He was not that light, but was sent to bear witness to that light. That was the true light, which lighteth every man that cometh into the world. That was the true light, which lighteth every man that cometh into the world. This rather obscure verse does not mean to tell us that every man in this world acknowledges the light and is saved by it. It is rather a further comment upon the need for the incarnation. If we read in the second chapter of St. Paul's letter to the Romans, we would discover that every man has a conscience. He knows right and wrong, whether or not he has seen the written code. God has put that conscience in man. He can say he does not believe in absolutes. He can say that he does not know the meaning of right from wrong. He can say that he doesn't think fornication or adultery or homosexuality or drunkenness or nudity is wrong. He can say it, but that is a dishonest claim. Man can harden his conscience, but he cannot kill it as long as he is alive. But it would be nice to say that he's not fooling anybody but himself. Unfortunately, that is not true. He is fooling his sons, his daughters, his students, those who watch his programs, those who buy his books, and on and on. Even so, the light of conscience remains. It's there. Every man has it. It lights every man that comes into the world. This means to tell us that every man is guilty, and therefore every man is in condemnation, and that every man knows it, whether or not he will admit it. It was necessary for God to come into this world to take care of that fatal flaw. It's also true that man has this light of conscience. He can, if he is willing, acknowledge the incarnate God, his coming, his work, and his solution, and accept it. The longer time goes on, and the more societies deteriorate and degenerate, the lower the flame of conscience flickers, but it is still there. The ancient wise man said, "A living dog is better than a dead lion, because as long as there's life, there's hope." Never believe the lie that there are men in this world who do not know the difference between right and wrong. And never believe the lie that there are men who cannot come to God through Jesus Christ if they choose to. The truth is that God is not willing that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance. God will have all men to be saved and come to the knowledge of the truth. Christ died for the sins of the church, and not for ours only, but also for the sins of the whole world, according to St. John's first letter, 2nd chapter. God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. The Spirit and the bride say, Come. And let him that heareth say, Come. And whosoever will, let him come and take of the water of life freely. When all the arguments are done, only two things will prevent man from accepting the free gift. One is the choice not to do so. The other is ignorance of the offer, and that speaks to the urgent mission of the church to take this gospel into every place and to every person. The world is in a fallen and dark condition. They cannot see their way out of the fog. They cannot extract themselves from the mire. The actions that offer salvation to man are initiated by God. It is only by the Word coming down into the darkness and finding man where he is hiding behind the trees of guilt and shame that man can find salvation. There is no ability in man to get himself out of the dilemma by religion, education, philosophy, politics, or any other fallen device. He was in the world, and the world was made by him, and the world knew him not, but the light of conscience can see and respond to the light of the world. Man is already condemned, and his conscience tells him that. This one who is the light of the world is later to say, I didn't come into the world to condemn it. That would be pointless. The world is already condemned. I came into the world so that men might see the light and by him be saved. He came unto his own, and his own received him not. The accelerated and final program of God in the Old Covenant was with the nation of Israel. The 3rd chapter of Galatians tells us that the law, the Old Covenant, was a schoolmaster to bring us to Christ. A schoolmaster teaches something, or at least they used to. In this case, the schoolmaster taught the human race a much-needed lesson. It is that God could choose out a nation from among the sons of Adam. He could take this nation under his care and protection. He could dwell among them. He could feed them with manna from heaven. He could assuage their thirst with water out of the rock. He could cause mighty cities and fortresses to fall before them. He could come down to this earth, sit in their synagogues, open the holy book, and teach them out of it by declaring truth in a perfect way which only God understood. But it would not, because it could not, bring man to God. That was the purpose for all that covenant with Israel, and that was the purpose for abandoning it. Despite the fact that the religious sons of Adam still believe this can work, the Bible is clear about it. Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, how oft would I have gathered you together as a mother hen gathers her little chickens under her wings, but you would not have it. I would have, but you would not. Therefore I say unto you, your house is left unto you desolate. The kingdom is taken from you and given to a people bringing forth the fruits thereof. Of course, this was the lesson that the schoolmaster was supposed to teach. Genealogy will not bring man to God. The law will not bring man to God. Religion will not bring man to God. The natural covenant made with Abram's seed for a people of the flesh will not bring man to God. Only Christ can bring man to God, and that is why he came into this world. The writer continues, he came unto his own, and his own received him not. But as many as received him, to them gave he the power to become the sons of God, even to them that believe on his name, which were born. Do you hear that? Which were born, not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God. Not of blood, not of the will of the flesh, not of the will of man. The law failed. His own would not receive him. Pilate said to them, "You're crucifying your king." But they replied, "He's not our king. He said that. We did not say it. Take that sign down, Jesus, King of the Jews. We don't want him. You take him. Away with him. Crucify him." Pilate said incredibly to Jesus, "Don't you hear the lies they're telling about you? Aren't you going to fight for your own rights? Speak up, man, and give me something with which to defend you." But Jesus replied to the effect, "Something's happening here, Pilate, that you do not understand. The kingdom in this world, for which I have fought valiantly in the past, is being eternally abandoned. If this new kingdom which I am establishing were of this world, well then, of course, my servants would fight that I should not be unjustly executed. But from here on out, my kingdom is no longer of this world. They have written their own sentence. We will not have this man to rule over us. We don't want him or his corny little kingdom. He's not our king. And so it shall be. The kingdom which I am establishing by dying for the sins of the world is not now and will never again be of this world." And thus it came to pass, as indeed it was prophesied of old, that Adam's children were rejected finally and forever as being fit for or having any place in the eternity of God. The reformation of Adam's race had faced its final test and failed, as the cursing of the fig tree attested. The old covenant of the flesh and the law, made with the natural children of Adam, would never again be countenanced by God. To this great truth, St. Paul adds in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verses 16 to 18, that from here on we do not know any man after the flesh. Once we knew Christ after the flesh in his earthly ministry, but from here on we will never know him as a man after the flesh anymore. Christ will never return to this earth as a Jew and as a descendant of Abraham's natural seed. The old covenant of the flesh, in which that was significant, is no more. Therefore, if any man be in Christ, he is of the new creation. The old is gone, never to return. For the born-again person, all things are of the new creation, and all things are of God, who has reconciled us unto himself, not by the nation, not by the law, not by the land of Israel, but by the resurrection of Jesus Christ to new life in the new kingdom and covenant. Now we are ambassadors sent out by God to tell this message to the world and to encourage them to be reconciled the same way we were. It's not by genealogy, works, law, or religion, but by faith in the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ and the gracious gospel offer. Be ye reconciled to God.
Read more at godspointofview.com. A copy of this book is available from Amazon in Kindle and paperback format. Link in the description.